Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Dara Treseder. She's the CMO over at Carbon. Dara, welcome to the show. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be on here with you.
Absolutely. You and I recently connected. We had you on another podcast that we produce, Building Bridges with Jamie Miller and the folks over at Skybridge Associates. Had a great panel discussion there. Today, we're going to be diving into something that's near and dear to your heart, talking about ABM, but going beyond the sales and marketing alignment. I think if we did another episode here that just vaguely said, hey, if you're going to do ABM, you need to be aligned with sales, people would skip right to the next episode. You are passionate about the fact that it needs to go a higher level than that and go broader in the organization. So we're going to be talking about some things there, a marine analogy I know we're going to jump into that's going to be a little fun. But before we do any of that, Dara, I would love for you to share just a little bit about yourself and what you and the Carbon team are up to these days.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a proud member of Carbon. Carbon is an incredible 3D printing company that's finally fulfilling the promise of 3D printing. For a long time, there was a lot of talk about how 3D printing would actually go into manufacturing, and Carbon's the company that's actually making that happen. And so it's a really exciting time to be in this space. It's an exciting time. I'm a technologist at heart, so I love seeing how technology can really improve our lives and help us better protect the planet. And that's sort of what we're doing here at Carbon. And before I was at CMO at Carbon, I was CMO at GE for GE Business Innovations and GE Ventures. And before that, led marketing organizations at Apple and other companies.
Awesome. Impressive resume already so far in your career. And, those technology roots are just evident there from GE to Apple, different pieces in the technology sector. Really interesting. I came from selling office equipment for 10 years before joining Sweetfish. And there was all this talk about 3D printing applications in the office, in addition to manufacturing. So it's really intriguing to see kind of what's new, because I've kind of been out of touch in what's happening there. So cool that you guys are on the leading edge there. So let's dive into our conversation about ABM. You have come up with a different term that you kind of refer to your ABM methodology that you guys are employing there at Carbon. And it's all about going a level above sales and marketing alignment to drive alignment more broadly with other key departments within your organization, right?
Absolutely. In fact, I actually call it precision marketing because I think when you know the target accounts, that's just the start of the journey. It's not just about alignment with sales. It's about alignment with product. It's about alignment with operations. It's about alignment with supply chain. I think in order for us to better serve the customer, the target base that we're going after, it's going to take a deep cross-functional alignment across the board for us to deliver and communicate with our customers in a way that we're actually going to reach them. And most importantly, deliver on the promise, right? It's one thing to go to a customer and say, hey, here's what I can do. It's another thing for you to exceed. And we have kind of a mantra here at Carbon, meet or beat. We always want to beat, but at the very least, meet any expectations we put out into the market. So I think that cross-functional alignment is really important. And I think that goes even deeper than sales and marketing. So for B2B marketers, in order to be successful, I think you got to get out of the bubble of it's just about sales and marketing. That's just a start. You have to start thinking about how we're working with product, how we're working with operations, how we're working with all of the other different aspects of finance, the other different aspects of the organization in order to be able to deliver an unparalleled offering that is going to absolutely help you dominate the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those, as you and I were talking offline, are kind of tangential to sales enablement, sales training, and somewhat they might be close to marketing. Depends on kind of your organizational structure, comms and PR. I think we're going to dig into that here in a little bit as well. But events, how do you create that seamless journey from digital to in person, which is extremely important with everything going on in the world today. As you think about it, I was kind of picking your brain earlier, Dara, and you mentioned to me that the key to all of this, to driving this alignment, is not just to realize, okay, it's not just sales. I love how you said that. That alignment is just the start. Then you've got to go broader. Now, how do you do that? Tell us about kind of what's been key in your mind as you've gone to these other department heads and tried to create an integrated approach across product operations, finance, sales, comms, PR, from the marketing team that you lead.
So I think the most important thing is setting a North Star. And I always say marketing is responsible for partnering with the CEO to get that future vision and painting it, right? What is the future vision of the company? Where are we going? And I think once you work with the CEO to paint that future vision, then it's a lot easier to come up with the right positioning. And positioning is so important because it's not just about, it's positioning across everything from the product all the way to the corporate positioning, to how we talk to our employees, it's thinking about positioning in a 360-degree holistic way. I think once you've painted that future vision, the positioning is the storytelling. It's the expression of that vision. And when you have those things locked in, dialed in, then you're much better positioned, pun intended, to be able to work with the different functions within your organization to march towards that. Right. So it's almost like it's got to be everybody in the company has to be marching towards this future state. And I think it's like, it's imagining the future. It's calling it what it's supposed to be, articulating what it's supposed to be, and then pushing all functions of the organization working together to bring that future closer faster.
One, I love the pun that you dropped there. Jeremy Wellman on our team, who is the resident pun master, is going to love that if he's listening to this episode.
I thought he would.
Yeah, absolutely. And number two, what you're saying there reminds me of some of the common things we've talked about on this show before, from what's kind of become known as the best sales deck ever from Zora, right? Painting that picture of the future state. They weren't talking about, hey, we can help you take subscription payments. They were talking about there's a bigger shift in the world. Here's the promised land of taking advantage of this shift, or at least avoiding the pitfalls of being left behind. And here's how we help you get there. I want to double click on something real quick. Dara, you mentioned that relationship with the CEO, and you've been in organizations of vastly different sizes, throughout technology, as we talked about earlier. Any tips for other CMOs in navigating that relationship with the CEO when it comes to this positioning and overall alignment? Kind of the theme of this conversation is around the different organizations, but you mentioned that crucial relationship between CMO and CEO. Anything from kind of your current position or anything historically coming from that conversation that you think other marketing leaders need to learn from?
It's interesting because there's so many studies that have shown that while a lot of CEOs have faith in their CFOs and other members of their C-suite, when they're asked about their CMOs, they don't necessarily have that faith. So I think the relationship between the CEO and the CMO is so critical. It's critical for the company. And of course, it's critical for the CMO in order to be effective. And I would say, I think the key thing is, there was something that when I first of all took over communications functions, I used to always tell my comms leader, let's never believe our own press release. It's like, that's kind of like, you don't believe your own press release a little bit. And I think as marketers, we have to drink our own, I don't want to say Kool-Aid, so I'm going to say, our own healthy, fresh tap water.
There you go.
But I think we need to not try to market to the CEO, but instead lay the facts out and have a real discussion. I think too many marketers, when they get in discussions with the CEO, instead of pointing out data that's actually useful and relevant, they're talking about things the CEO doesn't care about. The CEO could care less about your impressions, right? They want to care about the business results. So I think being able to take and translate what you're doing into concrete KPIs that matter to the CEO, that matter to the board, and then being able to have that discussion with the CEO, I think establishes you and positions you in a place of credibility so that you can then start to work on things like the vision and the positioning. But if you don't have that trust in place, it's going to be very difficult for you to engage at the level that you need to engage with in order for this strategy to be effective. So I think it's really important to take a data-driven approach. It's really important to work to cultivate and earn that trust of the CEO. And the reality is, as a CMO, you're in a different position than someone like a CFO, whereas I think the CFO has the trust and has to lose it. As a CMO, we need to earn the trust. It's kind of an interesting dynamic because, of course, it's so much spend on marketing and they're not always able to see directly how the spend is translating into business results. So that's your job, is to tie that. And I know it's hard, right? Sometimes it's complicated, but the more we work to tie the connection between activity to impact, the stronger we'll be to be able to have a good relationship with our CEOs and ultimately be able to be the champion for our organizations that we need to be. And we can be.
Man, so much that you just unpacked there, Dara. I mean, one, realizing that you're starting with the deck stacked against you. I mean, according to the content and the studies that you referenced there, meanwhile, the CFO is saying, hey, we cut costs 10% because I did this one thing over the last quarter and boom, there it is, right? So there's that, realizing kind of that dynamic and not, saying, woe is me, but taking action on it, being data-driven, but translating that, not saying, well, we got this many MQLs and this many impressions and this social feed has this many followers, but taking the time to take that data-driven approach and translate it into the things that the CEO cares about. And one thing I've seen even on a small team, our CEO, James, wants to see, like 3, 4, or 5 things, and sometimes we have conversations like, well, what about this? And I hadn't kind of taken the time to go that next level there. So whether you're a team of 5,000 employees or 25 like ours, I think what you're saying holds true.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. You probably already know that we think you should start a podcast if you haven't already. But what if you have and you're asking these kinds of questions? How much has our podcast impacted revenue this year? How's our sales team actually leveraging the podcast content? If you can't answer these questions, you're actually not alone. This is why Casted created the very first content marketing platform made specifically for B2B podcasting. Now you can more easily search and share your audio content while getting greater visibility into the impact of your podcast. The marketing teams at Drift, Terminus, and here at Sweetfish have started using Casted to get more value out of our podcasts, and you probably can too. You can check out the product in action at casted.us/growth. That's casted.us/growth. All right, let's get back to the show.
I want to come back to something as we were talking about broader alignment throughout the organization between marketing and other key stakeholders that are going to help you drive your ABM initiatives, what you call precision marketing, and that's PR and comms. So I want to come back to that marine analogy that we mentioned at the top of the episode. Tell us a little bit about how you think PR and comms, their relationship with marketing in this ABM approach, can really have the maximum impact.
Yeah, thank you. This is a topic that I love talking about because unfortunately, I feel like PR and comms in some organizations are divorced from marketing efforts. And I think that's actually a strategy for failure. I think it's important to have PR and communications as one of the tools in the toolkit of the marketing leader. And the reason for that is because I was talking about the fact that my husband is a former Marine, a U.S. Marine who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And if he's listening to this, he'd probably be horrified because I'm sure I'm butchering the analogy. My very limited understanding of one of the things that the Marines do is they go in to make sure that they create an environment that the other arms of the military can create an environment that will allow and will better enable the other arms of the military to be successful. right? And I think that's a really important role that PR and comms can play. For example, if you've painted this future vision, you said, this is who we are, this is who we want to be, it's then important that you use PR and communications to actually tell the world about that vision. And I'll give you a very real example from where I sit. So I just talked about the fact that we're a 3D printing company that's actually going into production and into manufacturing. But that's something that's been talked about but hasn't been demonstrated until we came along. And we have some fantastic use cases, whether it's the Adidas 4D shoes or helmets by Riddell or bike seats by Specialized, of actual products that were 3D printed that consumers are buying and wearing and using to, whether it's improving head protection with the helmets with Riddell or helping them run faster and better with the Adidas shoes, or a more comfortable and successful ride with the bike saddles. Are concrete products, and we use and leverage PR and communications to make sure the world knew about those products. So when we were going to other companies to say, hey, you can use our technology to make great products, they're like, oh yes, I've heard of this. We created that environment that allowed us to be more successful as we took precision marketing to go after targeted accounts. So I think that that's just a really important thing for marketers to consider, is how are we using PR and communications to tell the narrative and the story that will open the door for us as we begin to engage with these targeted accounts. Makes it much easier for the salespeople. It accelerates the buyer's journey. It simplifies the buyer's journey, and it shortens the sales cycle. So I think that's a really important tool. And if you're a CMO, you're listening to this, and you don't have PR and communications right now reporting into you, you need to think about the conversation with the CEO about how to better leverage that aspect and that function, which is a toolkit in a CMO's toolbox that you need to be able to use to arrive at the business results and decisions that you're capable of.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can see that analogy playing out. I mean, that air cover or kind of that front wave, as you mentioned before, the Navy, the Air Force comes in. Even though I live in Colorado Springs, a stone's throw from the Air Force Academy, I did not come from a military family. So I'm going to, much like you mentioned, not do your husband and everybody listening to this that has more experience there, do a disservice by trying to work out that analogy, because I don't know where I'm going. But I can see it there. And I hope he appreciates that. And I think it does at least paint some mental picture for folks out there. Dara, this has been a great conversation. I love your passion for making other marketing leaders more effective, learning from some of the things that you've encountered so far in your career, some of the things you guys are putting into practice at Carbon. If anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you, ask any follow-up questions, or just be able to engage with you and continue to learn as you continue on your journey there at Carbon, what's the best way for them to reach out and stay connected with you?
Well, to learn more about Carbon, please visit our website, www.carbon3d.com. And you can follow me on social media at Dara Treseder, just my first name and last name, Dara Treseder. I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter. So if you want to follow me to learn more about my journey and what's happening at Carbon, would love to continue to stay in touch. Thank you.
Great stuff. Dara, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.